The ultimate goal is to make sure that the right people are in the right seat at the right time to make the company successful. The harder thing is to create an amazing, engaging culture at a company that doesn't have like a world-saving mission. What you're doing is designing somebody else's experience. Radical candor with a new performance review system that is not great.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Leaders in Talent podcast. And I'm very excited to have Katie Evans here with me, Katie Evans Reber. She's a distinguished leader in the HR space. She boasts over a decade of impactful contribution to startups, including influential roles at Gusto and Wonolo, and currently as a Chief People Officer at Gladly. She continues to shape organizational success through her strategic HR leadership, and Katie's commitment to fostering inclusive and innovative workplace cultures truly sets her apart. Beyond her professional achievements, Katie finds joy in family life, sharing a fulfilling journey with her wife and now 11-year-old son. And her expertise, coupled with a genuine passion for people and progress, defines Katie as a driving force in the dynamic intersection of HR and technology. Katie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Adriaan. I'm so happy to be here. This is amazing.
Great. So Katie, let's dive right in, because your bio explains the tip of the iceberg, but you've already had a phenomenal career. You've made some interesting transitions from actually basing freight, big container ships to Gusto, for example. And now in your last role as the CPO at Gladly, a fast-growing SaaS customer service software company. What has been a pivotal moment in your career?
Yeah. So I think that the most influential moment in my life and career was the moment that I realized that I am really interested in thinking about how we spend our lives at work. And this happened pretty early on in my career. I was working for a financial REIT in 2008 when the financial crisis happened. And at that company, we went from, almost 1,000 employees down to 80 employees over the course of 18 months. And which was hard, but also a recurring theme in my career where I kind of happened to be in the right moment at the right time to experience a lot of the ups and downs of the market since then. So, but really that moment when I realized this problem is so interesting and I probably can spend the rest of my life thinking about it and thinking about sort of all the permutations of employee experience and how we show up at work and how we're evaluated at work and like what work means to us.
Are you facing market volatility? Need to hire quickly or have a team that sits idle? Meet Matcher, your flexible recruitment and sourcing partner. Scale your recruitment capacity up or down without compromising on quality. Trusted by Booking.com, Miro, Heineken, Grammarly, and Deal, Matcher is the RPO disruptor making waves in Europe and the US. For scale-ups and corporates, Matcher covers engineering, go-to-market, and G&A roles. Visit Matcher.io to see how we can support you. That's MATCHR.io.
As human beings, really has set me up for everything that I've done going forward into this day and keeps me excited and keeps me interested and keeps me coming back for more.
Wow. That is a very strong and deep insight. If I can ask you the question, and maybe putting you on the spot here a little bit, like, what does work mean for you then, now also being on this journey for over a decade?
Yeah. So work for me is a really integral and huge part of how I identify as a person.
Yeah.
It is where I spend the majority almost of not only my actual time, but my brain time too. So like we're not at work, but we're thinking about work.
Yeah.
And for me, it's thinking about like the philosophical and meaning behind those questions. Like, what does work mean to you? And so for me, it's a really big part of, worth and how I measure whether I think that I'm being successful or doing what I need to be doing in life, and like how I'm doing at work really influences like how I feel about myself like on an ongoing basis. And so like the problem that I'm interested in thinking about is like, why does that happen? Like, is that the right thing to happen? But I also think that it is, because if we're spending our time not really caring about what we're doing, what are we actually really doing?
Yeah. Fully agree, right? We spend more time with our colleagues than we often do with our partner, right? Which is the reality, whether we liked it or not. I think we're going to touch upon this theme a little bit later, but tell me about the time when you first transitioned into a leadership role.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm the oldest of 3 siblings.
Yeah.
So I've been in a leadership role since early childhood.
Yeah. And siblings, younger sisters, younger brother?
I have a younger sister and a younger brother. I'm 7 years older than my sister and 10 years older than my brother.
Yeah.
And so I've been in a leadership role, honestly, since I was 7 years old. But I've always thought of myself as a leader. And I think that that's a really important message for folks out there who are not in a people manager role yet or a leadership role yet. It's really about how you think about yourself. And I've always thought of myself as a leader. I mean, my first job was at McDonald's. I lived in a small town. I grew up in Sonoma. There's not a lot of job opportunities for like a 15-and-a-half-year-old who just got their work permit. My first job was at McDonald's, and like, fast forward 8 months and I was the manager of the McDonald's at 16 years old. And so I also graduated high school when I was 16. So yeah, but also lots of other whatever. And then I spent my early 20s and late teens in a band and being a musician and touring and really being the leader in that situation. And then when I transferred into working life, after all my early days ended, I realized like really quickly that just being taught to do something and being told to do something in a certain way never sat and doesn't sit quite right with me ever. And that's like a leadership skill. So like I learned quickly in my earlier career where I wasn't in charge or the leader, that ultimate like role for me was not the right role. And I found much greater success, later on in my career when I was able to take that leadership role. And that's because I just have a vision and I just want to be creative. And I don't want to do things the way that they've always been done. And I'm not always going to be right. And I've learned so many lessons throughout this journey. And in fact, learned such an awesome lesson about designing employee experience. Oh gosh. So, I gotta connect you. So Samantha Gadd comes out of New Zealand. She has founded 2 companies, Humankind and Excellent. And Excellent is becoming like the foremost employee experience design school in the world. She's amazing. You should have her on your podcast. I should totally connect you after. But she said, like, listen, we as professionals and leaders think that we know what the right thing to do is all the time. But especially in the people profession, what you're doing is designing somebody else's experience. And it is like tantamount that you actually involve them in your process and in your thinking. You're designing for them. It's like a product-led design philosophy. It's really cool. I guess the answer to your question is I've always thought of myself as a leader.
Wow. And running a McDonald's at 18, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive.
18, but sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But at a very young age. And I do know how operationally and how hectic McDonald's can be as a customer. If you look back, right, you've been in a variety of different leadership roles at a variety of different size of companies.
Yeah.
Especially in those younger years when you in a professional work environment, in the people space, when you just started managing, looking back now, what advice would you give your younger self with some of the lessons that you now have under your belt?
I probably would tell myself that it was okay for me to feel out over my skis. I would go back and give myself permission actually for the things that I did, knowing I was way out over my skis and just figuring it out. And I would actually relax into that moment a little bit more and not stress me out as much, because what I know today to be true is that if I'm really comfortable, then I'm not in that like growth and learning mode. Like I'm all right, everything is working and it's fine, but probably it's not fine. And probably it could be better. And probably like just take the leap and feel uncomfortable and like, continue to grow and develop. I probably would just give myself a little bit of grace earlier in my career.
So interesting, right? So where do you feel now? Because you're now CPO of Gladly, right? Are there areas where you feel now still that you're over your skis, or are you able to sit with it? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Totally. And some days still way out over my skis. So like one thing about being a chief people officer that's different from any other role on the people team, the thing that has actually surprised me the most about being a chief people officer is that I spend the majority of my time actually thinking about the business and participating from a business perspective at the, executive team level. The majority of my time is spent being a member of the executive team versus being like the one person for everybody to come to, or who knows, or leads all the projects or does all the things on the people team.
Yeah.
And I spend the majority of my time being a member of the executive team. So I didn't go to college and am completely self-taught. I have not had very many mentors. It's like I'm a songwriter.
Yeah.
When I'm writing music, I don't listen to outside music because I want it to come from me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been my perspective in my career that I don't want a mentor or need a mentor, because I want to have like first principles thinking process about everything that I'm building and thinking about, because that's just what excites me. I don't know if that's right or wrong. Honestly, that's just been like my journey and what I want to ensure that what I'm doing is creative and original and comes from me thinking about the problems versus me internalizing what everybody else is doing about it.
That is interesting. That's fascinating. So let's unpack that a little bit, because I would like to dive a little bit deeper there. Maybe also because I'm the opposite. I try to get as much input and mentors and people I can bounce off. Literally, also one of the reasons to start this podcast, to learn from people like yourself.
Yeah.
So how do you then look at stepping into a new role in a new industry where you have no experience into a new role that you haven't done before, right? Like, how do you then become comfortable in that new environment, being fully self-taught and like letting your intuition feel, right? Like tell me a little bit more about that process.
I mean, it's not easy. Stepping into Gladly from Wonolo as an example was
explain to our listeners a little bit what Wonolo is and what Gladly is, so they understand where you came from, right?
Totally. So I actually think that one of the cool things about being on the people team is that to some extent you're industry product agnostic. But as we get more senior, we know that that's not true. So Wonolo, as an example, is a B2B talent staffing 1099 shift work marketplace. So as an example, like a customer like Nordstrom, they have a warehouse, they use Wonolo. If you're a Wonoloer, somebody who works on the platform, then you have downloaded the app, you've onboarded, whatever, and you can go on and you just accept a shift and you show up, right?
Yeah.
And so the mission is really about helping the folks that need this type of work be able to, put food on the table, pay their rent, do what they need to do for their kids. It's supplemental income for folks that are, just predominantly underemployed or not employed. So, but B2B marketplace, right? So moving into Gladly, where we're an enterprise SaaS company developing really cutting edge tools to improve your experience as a customer of brands that demand and want and require brand loyalty to keep you connected. And we're approaching that in a very different way than legacy tools like a Zendesk or a Salesforce, or, we're disrupting that industry by creating one conversation, a lifetime conversation between you and whatever brand you're interacting with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of two things. So very different kind of like, industries. One is like very mission driven.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're creating a culture that has its basis in a mission that everyone can get aligned with, it's actually really easy to create like an awesome, amazing culture. The harder thing is to create an amazing, engaging culture at a company that doesn't have like a world-saving mission, Like, the economy is world-saving. I mean, we require the economy. So if like we're contributing to making the economy easier, like, all right, we all benefit from that, right? But so to make that transition, you just first have to remind yourself that you actually don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like I actually don't. And you have to just take that time to learn. Every company has different acronyms. Every company describes revenue in a different way. A marketplace company from an organizational perspective is not set up the same way as an enterprise SaaS company.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn or relearn like the different functions of each team. Like a marketing org in a marketplace company is vastly different in how it's organized and set up and the outcomes that it's expected to achieve than an enterprise SaaS company, as an example. So like, we have to just continually learn through experiences, the, right way to really be, that HRBP, which is, as a chief people officer, the majority of your time is, if you distilled it down, you're just a really senior HRBP.
Yeah. And is it over time that just your confidence in your own ability has grown, that you're able to sit with that uncomfortableness? Is that basically what happened?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're talking about right now is imposter syndrome, kind of. That's what we're kind of.
I don't know. Like that could be, right?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I kind of think it is. And there was a point in my career where I recognized like, oh, I actually know what I'm talking about versus I'm just saying what I think,
Yeah.
And there was a point in my career where I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like what I thought and what I've done and the result and the experiential knowledge that I've gained doing this over this, like, actually, I'm kind of qualified to do this. And actually, I'm really good at this. And actually, this is what I'm supposed to be doing,
Yeah. Do you remember when that all of a sudden that feeling, was it at Gusto or even earlier, or did it come?
Yeah. There have been moments in my career where I'm like, oh, okay, that was cool. And an example is at Gusto, and to me, this is like kind of a career accomplishment moment, At Gusto, I was able to convince California insurance companies to cover fertility benefits for folks who were not diagnosed as infertile. And so what that meant was that it opened up fertility benefits for LGBTQIA couples in California. I did that at Gusto. And then it actually got picked up by one of the district supervisors in San Francisco who was running that year and made it part of his platform. And now like all San Francisco workers have access to that healthcare. So like there have been moments in my career where I've done things that are really cool that I'm proud of. But what I will say is that it's more about learning from my mistakes than anything else. Like I've made so many mistakes.
All right, let's hear it. Let's hear it. So what are some of those mistakes where you're like, in the moment you're like, oh, why did I do this?
It wasn't even in the moment though. It was like later.
Okay, tell me.
It was like later as my thinking has evolved that I realized, oh, that thing you did was not that awesome. So like one thing I'll say is, I moved into startups about 12 years ago, a little bit longer. I moved into startups from publicly traded companies. Like you mentioned, I worked at a container leasing company, which by the way is really interesting. Like if you ever actually want to know the mechanics of getting something shipped to the US from China and like actually the economics of that happening, it's like pretty cool. But, and then obviously a REIT before that, but I moved into startups because I felt like, all right, this is like a brave new world, you know? And it was like in the heyday, like it's different. Startups are different now. And we can talk about that. But 12 years ago, it was awesome. And you could do whatever you wanted, have your own original ideas. Like nothing was set in stone. Like you had the freedom to just like build and grow. I went to Gusto and created from first principles thinking, which now I'm embarrassed about because my thinking was not evolved, but like created from scratch, first principles thinking around performance management.
Yeah.
Like a performance review process, you know?
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm obsessed with thinking about how we best like review, like what does performance mean? How do we review it? Like I'm obsessed with this thinking and created something so much cooler now, but whatever.
We definitely want to hear from what you thought was the truth and like what you do now, right? So let's hear it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, you know, originally at Gusto, I partnered with who is still my very good dear friend, Annie Wickman. Look her up on LinkedIn. You should also connect with her. She's amazing.
Great.
We created a performance review process. And you know what? It wasn't revolutionary. It was non-anonymous peer feedback, It was a self-reflection. It was a manager reflection. And then it was a calibration. Yeah. And then it came out with a rating, you know, needs improvement, good, strong, super unicorn, rating, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Oh man. And so we rolled that out, which, you know, okay, not great. But then at the same time, we also rolled out Radical Candor.
Yes.
I mean, Radical Candor with a new performance review system that is not great.
Yeah.
With non-anonymous peer feedback. Oh, yeah. I mean, people were leaving crying from their reviews, like just crying. You're like, what in the world?
Oh no. Yeah.
I know. Disaster. Like in my opinion. I mean, to be fair, Gusto still uses Gustified to this day. They still use it, you know, and they're, you know, thousands of employees now. And I'm sure it's changed since when we rolled it out, but it's
might have cushioned it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, but they're still doing it. And so, I mean, it scales, I guess I'll say that. Like, all right, I made something that scales, but just weaponized performance reviews. So bad. So like,
on the flip side, tell me, where are you now? So what's happening at Gladly in terms of performance reviews? That's, I would love to hear that.
Totally. So actually it started at Wonolo. I got the opportunity at Wonolo. You know, I was employee like 35 at Wonolo and left when we were like almost 700 people.
Yeah.
And I got to build the world from a cultural perspective in the way that I wanted it to be. You know what I mean? Like I just got to build this amazing world. And it was awesome. And I loved it. Included in that is really taking those lessons from Gustified and everything that didn't work, all the reasons why it was demotivating versus like motivating, and just start over. And so I like really was able to ask myself, like, what is the through line of performance or experience, or what does it mean? And what do you need as an employee, as somebody who works at a company, to feel really connected, really valued, like you know what's going on, like nothing's going to be a surprise, like that we're all pulling together to make everyone successful, because that's the ultimate goal, right? It's not to evaluate somebody's performance. The ultimate goal is to make sure that the right people are in the right seat at the right time to make the company successful. That's the ultimate goal. From a business perspective. From an employee perspective, it's wait, how do I spend my time? Where should I spend my time? Is this fulfilling to me? Am I growing? Am I learning? Am I developing in my career? Right? So like, how do we design something that like satisfies those two? They're not opposites. They're aligned, because they're totally aligned. Those two needs of the business and of the employee, they're super aligned. So how do we create like something that is like a through line throughout the whole thing? Well, first of all, what makes somebody successful at a company or in their career? It's math, right? Like we can boil it down to like a couple of things. And so I've created my methodology, framework, program, whatever it is. It's called Align. Align stands for 5 competencies: accountability, leadership, intellect, growth, and norms.
And what's the N?
And norms.
Norms.
So when we talk about accountability, understanding that Align is a structured interview process. Also, it's career tracks and how we level you and pay you. And then also it's how we evaluate your ongoing development, performance reviews. When we talk about accountability, we're talking about if you're, say you're like, a level 2, maybe this is your second job out of college, and you've chosen to be like a marketer, as an example. As a level 2 in the Align framework and accountability, you're just expected, you're receiving tasks and you are signing up for those tasks. And it's how you've held yourself accountable to making sure that that happens. As you get further along in your career and become a leader, it's about how you hold your team accountable and yourself accountable. And then way later as an executive, it's how do you set goals and strategy for the company and hold the company accountable. When we talk about leadership, we're talking about our ability to 10x ourselves. Like, how do we get more work done and feel better and have better results? As an IC, going back to that level 2 marketer example, it's maybe you gave me this task, but like, I'm going to take 30 extra minutes to think about this, and I'm going to figure out a way to automate it so that I can move on to something else. And as a leader, obviously it's 10xing yourself through your team. I is the subject matter, it's intellect. It's your subject matter expertise in the role, in the profession you've chosen to have. And so you can see how that carries through all career tracks. And then G is growth. It's about
question. Do you define the intellect, the expertise per level up front to be very clear? Hey, this is what we expect from you at this certain level.
And you know what's cool about this framework and rolling it out at a company? If you've ever tried to create career tracks and drive that project across an organization, it's a hard project. It's a hard project. It's like herding cats. It's like a really hard project. But when you do that through Align, and all the functional manager or the department head or functional leader has to do is actually fill out the subject matter expertise of what makes this role progress. And everything else across the company is the same and consistent. It makes the project really easy.
Super easy.
And then you can roll out an update to like an ask to update every 6 months, and it makes it really easy. And then we have these great conversations on a people manager perspective of like how we should be developing and training leaders, and then the competencies in ALGN change, or how do we want our company to operate as a whole? And those are the norms, It's not the cultural values. That's different. Like the cultural values are the one thing, but it's the norms that are really important. Like, here's how this specific company gets work done. Like,
so give me an example, right? So break that down for me, what the N then from a practical point of view means.
Totally. So an N at Gladly, as an example, is that we do a really good job of making every document, every project plan accessible to everybody. So there's a company norm.
Yeah.
We use the tool Notion. Shout out to Marianne.
Yeah.
We use Notion, but we also use Google. But like, we're really vigilant about making sure that when you create a doc that's meant to be shared, it's like in the right place. We can find it later. Like that's that's just like a norm of how we work. Another norm is that, we're just really direct with each other. We're all here for the same thing. We're really direct, and it's okay for you to be really direct.
Okay.
Another norm would be like, if you're not needed in this meeting, drop. Like,
oh, great. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's a norm, It's different than our values. Like our values are really important, of course, but like just the norms of how we work. Yeah.
We skipped the G. What about the G?
The G. Yeah. So the G is all about growth mindset. It's all about as a somebody who's more junior in their career, your ability to take feedback, your beginning ability to give feedback.
Yeah.
And then also your scope of role. So the scope of role that you have will change over time.
Yeah.
Going into being a leader, that's a huge step in G. And we spend a lot of time teaching how to make that step in growth, because all of a sudden your success is not measured on what you do in a day. Yeah. It's doesn't even actually have anything to do with you. It's just all about what your team did and making sure that they're successful and all the shine goes to them.
Is this abbreviation, because it seems really crystal clear, is also the power, because it's crystal clear, that the entire organization speaks the same language?
Speaks the same language. So when we go into the end of the quarter, we say it's align time. We have, we've built, my people team is amazing. They've built tools on the back end that just work. I mean, through Google Sheets and Google Scripts and Slack integrations. And so we run this whole process that we built from the ground up through Google and Google APIs and stuff. Yeah. And it's become, the language of the company. And so, we talk about it when we're in the interview process. This is our leadership interview, and here's what I'm going to ask you. And it's the same questions, and each interviewer is trained in discerning the competency that they're looking for within the Align framework. So,
and do people get a score per abbreviation, per letter, or is it below, on par, above, or is it 1 to 5 or 1 to 10? Is there a rating?
Yeah. So I hate ratings.
Yeah.
I just hate ratings. Like I just really philosophically don't understand how it makes anybody feel good about what they're doing to talk about the difference between something like meeting expectations, strongly meeting expectations, exceeding expectations. Yeah. I feel like no matter where you are, unless you're at the very top and you're there 100% of the time, it's not motivating. And the ROI it takes to calibrate somebody's what is one manager's meeting expectations versus another manager's exceeding expectations is the wrong conversation to be having. It's just a waste of time. It is
how do you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you do it?
Okay. So, I mean, what is valuable to know is, who are the top performers?
Yep.
Like, who do we require retaining to make this work? Yep. Who is like everybody else in the middle, which is a rad place to be. You're working, you're developing, you're growing. There's no judgment on you to grow faster. Like, we love that middle bucket. But then who is on the bottom, sort of like that as a people team, I'm not already in a conversation with, or as a manager, I'm prompting you to think about, so it's really that top, middle, bottom.
Yeah.
And those are not the right words, because those words don't make anybody feel good. Like top, bottom, those are not the right words either. But in reality, like from a business perspective, like that's what you really need to know. We do, as part of the Align calibration, we do 2 calibrations a year. Normal. And we talk about everybody in the organization. And I ask, but I think what I've A/B tested sort of over the years, and actually what just got an iteration in the last time I did it. So always learning, always growing.
Yeah.
But I ask a certain set of questions. So I ask, what is this person's top areas of strength? What are they doing really well right now?
Yeah.
Or over the last 6 months? What are their development areas? Like, where do they need to grow? Right? What are we talking about in terms of this person's career development, to make sure we're always having those conversations? And then I ask, knowing everything that you know about the role you have today, would you rehire this person? And I'm looking for the answer from 2, and I say this to them, but I'm looking for the answer from like 2 different lenses.
Yeah.
Lens number 1 is obviously like a performance lens, like, how's this person doing? Would you rehire them? But number 2 is from an organizational design perspective, to help managers understand that their team is theirs to grow. And if it's not the right thing, if it's not the thing that you as a manager or people leader, functional leader, whatever, is the right thing to make the business successful, like, you have permission to think about that. And I want you to think about that. So from an organizational design perspective and a performance perspective. And then I ask, is this person crushing it? That is the proxy for a ratings question. Like, right?
And is that a yes, no? Is that a maybe? Or
it is a granular, deep response that I get from managers. It's everything from absolutely, this person's crushing it. If they left, we'd be,
it would suck.
Yeah, it would suck.
Yeah.
To, what, this person's awesome, but they're not quite crushing it yet. They're working through their level. They're getting there. They're doing great. No, I would not rehire. No, this person is not crushing it.
Yeah.
And from those granular answers, if you have to have a rating system, which is, people love a rating system. It's really hard to get around.
Yeah.
When you tie it to comp, people want you to have a if this, then that thing to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. And so, we can transcribe those crushing it questions and the rehiring question into a rating. Great, good, needs improvement. Yeah. But it does not have to be more granular than that.
But those are the 3 kind of like,
I mean, yes. And
I understand you don't want to like touch it, almost touch it, but like that's how you capture.
The reality is, when you have an agile performance alignment process like Align is, you have to eventually tie it to comp, and you have to be able to say to people, like, why something happened. Why did you get a X% versus a Y%? Or like, and the manager, no matter how experienced they are, not experienced they are, has to be equipped to be able to have that conversation. And so it's our job as the people team. I think on one hand, it's our job to make that really easy for them. On the other hand, I want them to have that like learning experience of like how to have this hard conversation. So like, I want them to have all of the information, and I want it to be like fair and equitable. So in that sense, like, I ask the 2 questions. They're really granular. We have really good conversations around them. Ultimately, they distill down to something that creates a something compensation increase. And that's what works the best for them. And, that's what I learned. That's what I learned from Sam, is like, you're designing employee experience designed for them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And what has the feedback been, and how have you incorporated that?
really good. We're actually about to just release this process, but what we've done is had like a number of focus groups, people manager focus groups to get feedback. Yeah. And we have designed this process for them. So we'll see.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Katie, time flies. This was so good. This was fascinating. I am going to ask you 2 more questions.
Yeah.
So Gladly is heavy on AI. Your software platform for, if I say this correctly, for basically helping customer service agents to, do better work for their clients. Am I saying that correctly?
You are. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Customer service platform. So that focuses on the lifetime conversation with the customer. So if you've ever returned anything to REI or Nordstrom or Parker or Ulta, every communication you have with that brand is going into a single profile and a single lifetime conversation. That's how we're different than the other companies that are out there right now.
AI plays a big role there. Yeah. I was finding it fascinating of people leaders that work with a heavily AI embedded software company in terms of what do you see happening on the AI front? For example, what you're using in your own software and what's being translated now towards your people organization.
Yeah. So, I think a really interesting project for us as a people team that needs to find its way into our people team roadmap this year is really figuring out which tools from a whole organization standpoint, if that can happen, or is it individual teams? Like the people team, I need to lead an initiative at the company to bring in AI to make all of our jobs easier. It's kind of a big project. Like it's kind of a, we have SOC 2 compliance. So bringing in different like tools is like hard for us too, as it is with most companies. But I do think that like people leaders who are not actively going out and looking at these tools and at least facilitating an exploration of these tools for your organization, I mean, we're going to fall behind in terms of productivity if we don't do this. Yeah.
Anything concrete that you've already done, or is it still in the roadmap?
No, we're still evaluating. I mean, there's been a massive amount of VC funding that's been pent up and held back from growth companies, just funneled into AI companies. And so there are so many tools out there. And honestly, all of them are a year, 18 months, maybe some are 20, maybe some are longer because they've some coming. But like every tool out there right now is just a baby. It's like we don't know. And none of them work exactly the way that in our minds it will work, will be a reality. But like none of them are actually ready yet. So it's just the exploration, continued commitment to investment in understanding these tools that is really important for people leaders to think about for their organizations. And you're going to try a bunch of stuff. Nothing is perfect right now, but like in the trying, you're going to I think we will all, as consumers of AI, come to understand how AI can best serve us. Right. And in that, the AI companies will be able to like monetize what they're doing. So, which is a problem for them.
Definitely. Not our problem. Katie, this was so good. Time flies when we're having fun. So what is a question that you would like me to ask our next guest?
I love that. So I would like you to ask your next guest what they think the role and responsibility of a company is in the coming years. How do they influence policy and change, or should they? That's what I
That
would.
is not. What's your favorite book? I love it, Katie. It's deep and it will strike a very, very interesting conversation. Katie, I am so grateful. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Just come find me.
Yeah, great. I will put it in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening to the Leaders in Talent podcast.
Thank you.